Hey y'all, I'm going to go through this part one of my extended talk on how to win the peace in the war with Iran. First part of this is 5,800 words. It's about 40 minutes long. I think I'm going to have to split it up in two, and also part two is going very slowly. I'm about 30,000 words. I got to get it down under 6,000 words, and so I'll work on that and get back to you. But what I want to do here is I just want to do a rough run through here of this, send it out to some trusted friends, get their feedback on it, and then cut the final version tomorrow. So here it is. You get a chance to see the chapters here. Today is February 27th, 2026. I'm Darrin Moore, and this is Another Way. I'm your conservative, bookish beach bum bunkered on a private island in the redneck Riviera. And on this program, Another Way, I try to discuss things in a far deeper way than you'll find anywhere else in the media. Today, I'm going to give you another way to look at the looming war with Iran, what our war strategy might be, and why. I'm also going to give you a crash course in warfare strategy and global diplomacy, give you a vision for what lasting peace in the region might look like, and at the end, I'll give you a brief history and the demographics of each of the countries in the entire region, and how their interests and values might clash or align with ours and their neighbors. I will start with the key issues facing us today and work backwards so that the longer you watch this video, the more you will gain not only an eagle's eye view of the big picture, you'll also have a worm's eye view of what's going on in the minds of each of the key players in the countries involved. If you like what you hear here, I would really appreciate you sharing this video on social media and subscribing to my new channel, Another Way. I used to be somebody, Ronald Reagan's greatest biographer once called me the official librarian of the American conservative movement. I've been in the trenches of political campaigns from dog catcher all the way up to the president. I helped found a school which taught political philosophy and tactics. I was a radio talk show host, a syndicated columnist. And then I got kicked off of Facebook and sent to the Google archipelago. A few years ago, I got out of politics altogether, got a break in the music business, moved to Nashville, grew out my hair, and eventually I found my way down here, moved my entire library down to the Gulf of America, where I will launch my new program, Another Way, which talks about philosophy, theology, psychology, ontology, economics, and politics. First, I should say that when it comes to war, I am neither a jingo nor an ostrich, neither an internationalist neocon nor a delusive isolationist. I am certainly not a pacifist, but I am a tremendous man of peace. I believe that you achieve peace through strength, and that weakness and contempt only invite aggression. Indeed, one of my greatest discoveries since being unpersoned on social media is mimetic theory of René Girard, a nonviolent theory which explains human conflict in the vein of Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., and Jesus Christ. It is my considered opinion that our foreign policy posture should be a militarily strong but humble and prudent foreign policy that is clear about its interests and minds its own business whenever possible, and which lets others mind their own business as well. I believe that we make a huge mistake pretending to be the world's police force, and we make an equally big mistake abandoning our allies to enemies and the world's worst despots, bullies, and empires. Furthermore, I believe with Russell Kirk that our Constitution is not for export. Our job is not to go around the world imposing little constitutional republics everywhere we go, or turning the world into one vast United States. Americans used to believe that the people of each of our own states had the right to their own laws, and I still believe that nations do too. But my beloved country is about to turn 200 years old, and there are plenty of reasons to believe that our Constitution, although it's the oldest surviving Constitution on the planet, did not go far enough in restraining the government from usurping power from the people in the states and becoming tyrannical itself. Still, it's the longest Constitution surviving on the planet, and the United States is still the best country in the world. Happy birthday, America. As John Adams said, our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people, and that it is wholly inadequate to government of any kind of other people. I think we should be willing to offer other countries reciprocal respect for the conduct of their own affairs, so long as that our primary interests don't collide. So, what kind of government a country has is secondary to whether it is willing to live in peace with us. Furthermore, I believe that all war is a failure of diplomacy. I think every war America ever found herself in, including the first one, could have been avoided with better diplomacy and prudent statesmanship. Politics is the art of the possible, and our leaders imprudently missed opportunities for far better options than war. And as the crises grew worse, good options diminished until there were only bad options, and we did go to war. For reasons that I'll be describing in part 2, I believe that we have reached that very point with Iran, and that there are no longer any better options than to completely destroy Iran's ruling mullahocracy, that oligarchy of cleric-led mullahs, and its military apparatus, and usher in a new regime that not only completely surrenders to us, but is willing to live according to our vision of peace. I know it may sound a little weird to hear that term surrender nowadays, but Americans used to know that victory over and surrender of our enemy was the point of war, which is to say, which is to win the peace, our peace. And for nearly 50 years now, America has misunderstood that Iran has already been at war with us. It is time to return the favor. Having squandered better options for nearly 50 years, all-out war is now our only good option. Chapter 2, Iran today, a people overpowered by despots. Because I have tremendous faith in the oppressed people of Iran, I don't care much about what kind of government they set up after they surrender, so long as the leaders adhere to the terms of surrender. I'll discuss this more in part 2, but permit me to point out that 70% of Iran's population is under the age of 35. And 70% of the people despise their current regime. The mullahs made a huge mistake when they sent their best and brightest kids away to Western universities for education. There's an old line that if you let Caesar educate your children, do not be surprised if they return home as Romans. The vast majority of Iranian kids who got a taste of life in the Western world loved it. And when they came home, they were more or less Westerners. If they didn't come home, of course, the mullahs would have their families whacked, which only fired their contempt for this regime even more. But these were the trendsetters in Iran for the last 30 years. And now well over 70% of Iranians despise this regime. They are among the most sophisticated people in the Muslim world, having been educated in Western ways. And they stand at the threshold of becoming one of America's greatest allies if we don't screw this up. So, as I have already said, our victory is, here's the victory. It's the complete destruction of the current ruling class and their military apparatus. However, there are 3 almost entirely separate militaries in Iran. First is the Artesh, then the Sepa, and then the Faraja. We only need to eliminate the latter 2. The first is the regular military, the Artesh. This army is not necessarily our enemy. We don't need to fight it explicitly. The people of the regular army are more or less loyal to the people of Iran. The second are the Sepa, the Iranian Republican Guard Corps. These are the fanatical dead-enders who are fiercely loyal to the ruling oligarchy. These are troops who most need to be obliterated because they are not only the enemies to America, they are the enemies of the Iranian people. The third military force is the police command, the Faraja. These are the worst of the worst. These are Hitler's brown shirts, but they are also often dressed in plain clothes. They are the secret police, the Gestapo, the Stasi, and the Mafia, all rolled into one. Whereas the Republican Guard are ideological zealots and highly trained, useful idiots, the Faraja are the cunning sadists. They are the ones who prowl the streets looking to abuse women for not dressing in the correct head covers, and they are the ones going undercover to catch dissidents and revolutionaries. Helping the Faraja, the police force, are about 300,000 volunteers. Volunteers of a regime loyalists called the Basij. These are violent mobs that the Faraja employ to do their dirty work often. Of the 32,000 protesters who were killed in January's massacre, it's been reported that the majority of them were actually assassinated by the Basij, this voluntary force, were the ones who did much of the killing. Although during the war in Iraq, many of the Republican Guard Corps members, including members of their top leadership, defected over to us. Even though that's the case, these forces are tough and loyal, but they are now almost totally exposed since Israel wiped out their entire anti-aircraft capacity last year during the 12-day war. Rarely in the history of modern warfare has there been this much lopsidedness in military supremacy. We can easily obliterate most of the Republican Guard by dropping bombs down the chimneys of their bunkers. The best way to ensure none of their leadership takes over after we wipe out the regime is to wipe out this entire force as well. Much of that leadership is hiding along with the malocracy, so when we bomb one, we'll hit lots of the others. We should take care not to bomb civilians, of course, who will be future friends and allies to us. And for that very reason, like as in Gaza, these slimy bastards in the leadership will hide amongst peaceful citizens. But remember what I said about the Basij, of the so-called civilian volunteers who are the foot soldiers in the fight against protesters. They're the ones most likely being used as human shields for the Sepa, the Republican Guard, and the Faraja, the Gestapo. But the rats in the Sepa and the Faraja will hide among civilians. We will require help from the people of Iran to flush out and kill these monsters. Fortunately, in this war, the people of Iran will be our greatest allies. The Faraja and the Basij teamed up for the massacre of the protesters last month. And with some estimates up to 40,000 unarmed protesters butchered and far many more arrested and still in their jails, the people of Iran will be eager to wipe out these brutal bastards from the face of the earth and unlock their prisons to free their fellow dissidents. We should arm them to do that very thing. The main reason why peaceful protests have not worked is because the regime does not fear the protesters, primarily because they have been unarmed. If the Basij and the Faraja were afraid that the protesters were armed and would start shooting back, then the Faraja and the Basij would flee. This is why Machiavelli said, the prince who is afraid of the people must build a fortress to hide in. But the prince who is not afraid of his people should always arm them and thereby make them his loyal subjects, who can then help keep control against those he does not harm. Disarming the people always makes them hate you. The supreme leader has armed his loyalists. It's time we arm the disloyalists as well, which I repeat, are more than 70% of the population. Let this also be a reminder to America. The reason why we have the Second Amendment is simple. If the First Amendment doesn't protect all the other amendments, the Second Amendment will have to. It will be bloody for both sides in Iran, and frankly, I don't want American blood to be spilled in this part of liberating the people of Iran. They can do their own purging of the Basij and the Faraja once we take out the majority of the Republican Guard and arm the dissidents. And this leads me back to the Artesh. It is quite likely that there are many senior leaders in the regular army, the Artesh, who despise the Republican Guard and this mullahocracy, these mullah leaders and Ayatollah. And therefore, they are more than willing to lead their forces, the Artesh, against them. We have surely infiltrated the Iranian regular military and have many allies amongst them. If we haven't, Israel surely has. Remember when Mahmoud Ahmadinejad admitted that the head of the Iran's secret service unit set up to monitor and target Israel's Mossad, their intelligence apparatus, it's Israel's version of the CIA. The guy in charge of the Iranian unit to target the Mossad was actually an Israeli spy himself, along with 20 of his top guys. Israel, it seems, is much better than our CIA at cultivating spies in enemy countries than we are. I'll discuss this in part 2. Nevertheless, we surely have people all across Iran that have been cultivated for this very point in history. Israel and we surely have lots of hidden aces up our sleeve. And you can bet big time that the heavy-handed role that these trump cards will play in overthrowing the regime, and the thugs in the Republican Guard and the secret police will be tide turning. We just need to destroy as much of the regime's forces as possible and let the Iranian people do the rest. I would not be surprised if we named one of the top generals from the Artesh as the interim leader of the country as soon as the Sepah forces are crushed and the Faraja and Bazij have fled. They'll go in and clean out the tunnels in which all these snakes of the Mulocracy are hiding, and we won't need many, if any, boots on the ground at all. As the late, great Angelo Codevilla wrote in his monumental book, you actually should read all of his books, particularly his last one before he died in 2022, America's Rise and Fall Amongst Nations. But as Angelo Codevilla wrote in his monumental book, Advice to War Presidents, a remedial course in statescraft, quote, "The natural function of armies is to deal death to foreign lands' ruling classes. This serves the positive function of clearing the way for new ruling classes who, to avoid their predecessors' fate, would be solicitous of our interests and police their own society accordingly. If armed forces are used in this natural way, they can inspire fear so healthy as to deter opposition. Alas, by using our armed forces unnaturally as constabularies, our statesmen have caused actual potential enemies to lose fear of our troops. We pay heavily for having lost this fear, and we will pay even more heavily to regain it again." Now, we have a huge opportunity, however, with Iran to get a lot of that respect and fear back. Iran is a golden opportunity to demonstrate this axiom and thereby regain the respect and fear necessary to once again be an effective deterrent force for peace in the region without having to have boots on the ground in endless wars where our military boys walk through a literal and figurative minefield daily. Here's another quote from Codevilla. "The American people's preference for tolerating inconvenience but then ridding themselves of enemies by short, decisive wars is a mark of sophistication, not of immaturity. Nor does our presumptive preference for peace amount to pacifism. On the contrary, it means recognizing that peace is the result of dealing with enemies successfully, and it concentrates the mind on what is needed to do so, including and especially in war." So now let's concentrate on the possible plans for this war. Chapter 3, War Plans, Destroying the Enemy and Empowering New Allies. For the reasons I'll describe in part 2, I believe that the Ayatollah will counter-strike with everything he's got right from the start. He knows that if we attack with everything we have short of nuclear weapons, his regime has no chance. But let me briefly make clear here that he is not concerned with winning this war or even surviving this war. His interest is primarily in his version of Islam winning the world. He even said it. He said that I don't care about whether Iran survives. He believes that patriotism is actually a heresy. He believes that an all-out war will summon the 12th Imam, unify the Muslim world, provoke a larger war of Muslims against all infidels, and usher in the perfect society promised by Prophet Muhammad. We are not dealing with a rational man here. We are dealing with a religious nut job, enthralled with his own delusions. More on that in part 2. Now, the primary danger of this war is the mullahs' long-range missile capacity. Estimates say that they have somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 of these long-range missiles. As we saw last year, they are not afraid to lob them into the heart of civilian neighborhoods. We should assume also that they are not afraid to turn as many of these as possible into dirty bombs, missiles laced with radioactive enriched uranium. Remember, this is the evil regime that forced children to run through minefields during the Iraq-Iran war in order to clear the path for their tanks and glorified how their little bodies had been blasted to bloody bits in their martyring service to their holy cause. That's who we're dealing with here. Therefore, I cannot emphasize enough that the primary first objective of this war is to prevent these missiles from even being fired. And failing that, destroying the ones they do manage to launch with our anti-missile defenses, with our interceptors. Another reason we must fight this war now is that we must knock out the malocracy before they acquire the low-flying supersonic missiles from China that are capable of destroying our ships by eluding our current missile defense systems. A future war will be far bloodier than the one that we can fight now. We need to win this gunfight while Iran is only carrying a knife. We saw last year that Israel's anti-missile defenses shot down all but a few of the 200 long-range ballistic missiles launched in 2 waves at Israel in October of 2024 in what Iran called Operation True Promise, phases 1 and 2. A new report out in the New York Times just this morning reports that Iran actually fired 574 ballistic missiles, and Israel and the United States tried to stop only 322 of them and successfully intercepted only 273 of them, an 85% success rate. 49 of these missiles made it through and struck meaningful targets. This report indicates a much higher success rate for the Iranians than has previously been reported. I had believed that only a handful of their missiles made it through. Hundreds of Iranians were injured, although apparently only 2 people were killed. And ironically, one of them was a Palestinian who did not take cover and who was hit by falling debris from an Iranian missile that had been shot down. This begs the questions. What if Iran had launched all 2,000 of their long-range missiles? Would it have overwhelmed their Iron Dome, the anti-missile defense system? How much more could Israel have withstood before they ran out of the anti-missile missiles? And what is America's capacity to defend its bases in the region if Iran fires these missiles at us? Iran managed to hit our base in Qatar last June with one of these missiles. It was a shorter range missile. But what would happen if they launched everything but the kitchen sink at us from the very start, knowing we will soon wipe out everything that they hold back? Surely they would manage to get many missiles through our defenses. This is why we must knock out as many of these long-range missiles as possible from the very start. Fortunately, these long-range ballistic missiles are the easiest to find, fix, and destroy. Most of them are launched from underground, but many are launched from mobile launchers. But because these missiles are huge, their launchers are easy to hit, especially during the pre-launch fueling stage. I heard a report yesterday that they began pre-fueling many of these missiles in case we started bombing them right after the failed peace talks yesterday in Geneva. One of the main priorities of the regime has been to increase the stealthiness of these missiles, making them more mobile and harder to find. Read about how they've adapted them to shipping containers that can be stacked atop otherwise peaceful cargo ships, trucks, and loaded on trains. The container lid pops open and the missiles are quickly launchable. For this reason, I wouldn't be surprised to learn of strikes on commercial ships. Sadly, many unsuspecting peaceful sailors who are being used as pawns will be sent to Davy Jones's locker because of this. Future cargo shippers will then have an added incentive to inspect their shipments more closely, however. But the majority of their long-range ballistic missiles are fired from underground. The location of these sites are well known. We also know where the cave complexes storing these missiles are, from which the missiles are launched through apertures in their ceilings. If we can bomb these before they know what hit them, we can prevent their launch. And by blowing up the entrances to these tunnels, we can trap them inside. This again points to the importance of, dare I say it, shock and awe strategy to catch them off guard with a devastating first strike. Vital in catching them with their pants down and their missiles exposed is our strategy to interrupt their communications. We have some new technology that can help with this that were first used in the snatch and grab operation in Venezuela last month to capture one of the mullah's buddies, Maduro. Once we commit to this war and make totally destroying and disabling their long-range missile capacity our top priority, I am confident that much of this primary threat will be eliminated. But it only takes one of these missiles to make it through our defenses to do real damage. Things have to go perfectly, and in war, it never does. Nevertheless, I think we neutralized this component of Iranians' military very quickly. Because ballistic missiles fly so high, I think we may also see some of them intercepted by our Space Force. This might be the first war in which lasers are used to shoot down these missiles. The lasers may be fired from the ground, from space, or even perhaps from some aircraft. Remember, my friends, the Democrats did everything they could to mock Reagan's Star Wars as a pipe dream. They did all they could to block funding to the Strategic Defense Initiative, SDI. They did everything they could to prevent him from defending ourselves and our allies with effective deterrence and cutting-edge defenses. Reagan always used to say that the evolution of warfare was one where new, better shields rose to defend against new and better swords. Today, we need not have the largest military force, although we should, just the best armed force with the best swords and shields to quickly defeat our enemies if they are too stupid to be deterred. In today's war, we might also add that we must hit the arrows and not just the archers. Of course, it's better just to hit the archers before they can launch any of the arrows. If there is one major mistake we've made militarily, it is not having enough arrows that can knock their arrows out of the sky. We are likely going to be severely depleted of our interceptor missiles at the end of this war, and that makes us vulnerable to attack by our other enemies across the globe. Remember, weakness invites aggression. We should not have allowed this situation to occur. Fortunately, we and Israel are by far the best at this technology, and our enemies will likely remain deterred because they know that while they may be able to slip some missiles through our defenses, we'll be able to slip all of our missiles through theirs. The strength of our deterrence, as always, will remain our resolve to use war as a means to gain our peace. If enemies don't start anything, there won't be anything. Fuck around and find out. Now let me talk about the difference between ballistic missiles and cruise missiles. Ballistic missiles are larger, rocket-propelled, high trajectory, extremely high-speed missiles that are easily detected and have low precision. They're used for long-range attacks. But cruise missiles are smaller, jet-powered, highly precise missiles that are difficult to detect because of their low trajectory and are used in shorter range attacks. They are essentially unmanned jet aircraft with bombs on the end of them that are harder to detect but easier to shoot down. Then there is this new strategy of weaponry about which I'm very concerned, and that is the drone swarms. These are small, slow, and deadly, but because of their massive numbers, they might be the hardest to defend against. These drone swarms keep me up at night, especially after seeing how they've been effective in fighting the war in Ukraine. I believe that we have pioneered drone warfare, and Obama sure used enough of them in more countries than anyone. And so I'm hopeful that we've also learned to defend effectively against them. I'd like to believe that they can be disabled by jamming their communications with the people and programs piloting them from afar. And I am confident that we have the capacity to give them enough flack that they'll not be able to penetrate very far. But I fear that this may be my faith, not my reason talking. Not only are our ships in the Arabian Sea and the Gulf of Oman extremely close to Iran, not to mention our ships and bases in the Persian Gulf itself, in the Straits of Hormuz. But they're going to have their hands full fending off ballistic and cruise missiles in the first place. A full court press by Iran could cause tremendous damage. Not enough to make Iran victorious, mind you, but it could cause us terrible loss of life. Again, this is why I stress the importance of taking out as much of their military capacity as possible on the very first strike. We've got not to get into a tit-for-tat kind of war. We have such an overwhelming military superiority at this point and a capacity for swift resolution of this war that we'd be stupid not to take advantage of it. We need to win this war quickly with overpowering force, accomplish our mission to obliterate this regime, and then get the hell out of there. Now, let me point out that in this war with Iran, we have complete superiority in every traditional facet of the military. When it comes to the Navy, it's not even close. We have swarms of submarines sailing below detection, and each of the Iranian ships likely has its own American Navy submarine escort trailing it from behind and below, just waiting for a kill order. Our Space Force is even more lopsided, even though it's very young. Thanks to our friends the Israelis, Iran has no air force and almost no air defense. However, during Operation Rough Rider last year, the Iranian-sponsored Houthi rebels in Yemen did give us some fits. We almost had a fighter shot down, and a fighter did roll off a ship that was banking hard to avoid a torpedo. The Houthi rebels began attacking cargo ships in the Red Sea right after October 7th, 2023, and were lobbing ballistic missiles into Israel from Yemen. Biden didn't do a damn thing about them. But when Trump came into office last year, he began attacking them from March 15th at least until May 6th, until they agreed to a ceasefire brokered by Oman. I'm not so sure a ceasefire was the prudent thing to do when we could have totally wiped them out, but Trump seems to really like ceasefire deals more than he wants lasting peace. Nevertheless, the Houthi rebels funded by and run by Iran learn lots about our military capacity and the president's proclivity for deal making. There are a couple ways, however, in which Iran's war capacity exceeds our own. The first is, and I hardly ever hear anybody talking about this, is their chemical warfare programs. The Iranians managed to hide their Fordo nuclear site for over a decade, and it is a lot easier to hide nuclear facilities than it is to hide chemical facilities. I think we, or Mossad, or Israel's CIA, would have caught wind of it before now, but Iran surely helped Syria's Bashar al-Assad acquire the chemical weapons he used on his own people when he crossed Obama's red line. This battle is much more of an urgent existential crisis for Israel than it is for us, so they are surely far more clear-eyed about the danger that Iran poses. But do not think Iran hates Israel just because they're Jews. They hate them primarily because they are Western, infidels, and successful, especially since adopting Bibi Netanyahu's economic package in 2005, after which Israel's economy has been booming, and also with the Israeli withdrawal of Gaza in 2006. The Muslim world clearly now knows, whether they want to admit it or not, that their relative poverty is not the fault of the West, but their own damn fault. Sadly, many gullible American university students do not understand this simple concept either. But look at Indonesia. It isn't full of hate for the West, and it's doing quite nicely, thank you. So are the Arabs, ironically, who live peacefully inside of Israel. Several million. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. I'll be talking more about this in part 2. There is another way in which Iran's war-making capacity is greater than our own, but I will talk about that at the start of the next chapter. Permit me to finish my predictive analysis of how this war might go down. As I've said, our first strike needs to be massive and diverse to destroy or disable their ballistic missiles and their cruise missiles, their drone swarms, and their anti-aircraft defense. Then we can have total freedom of movement in the skies above Iran, what Israel had last year from June 13th through the 24th, also known as the 12-Day War. America dropped those bunker-busting bombs on their 3 main nuclear sites on June 22nd. I predicted it on June 21st. And then President Trump forced Israel to sign a ceasefire. Just when Israel had Iran's mullahs on the ropes, Trump made Israel throw in the towel and call it a draw. Whatevs. Like I said, with the lone exception of Reagan, American leadership has squandered all our better options since the end of World War II. And now we are down to only bad options. And even my beloved Ronald Reagan doesn't completely escape my harsh criticism for mishandling Iran, and I'll turn to that in part 2 as well. Once we have complete air supremacy, we will be free to start striking Iranian Republican Guard Corps installations with precision bombs. Indeed, we have so many destroyers over there, we can launch many of these attacks simultaneously with the initial airstrikes upon their missile sites. The point is to make it plain to the commanders in the Artesh, the regular army, that the SEPA, the Republican Guard, is our enemy, not them. This should give the commanders confidence that they can proceed with their coup d'etat on the regime. Of course, our bomber wings in the middle of America will want to get in on the action as well, and will surely be dropping bunker-busting bombs on the underground layers in which the mullahs are hiding, and other institutions of this regime that require total obliteration with pinpoint precision. The fun part of this is the combination of our stealth fighting aircraft, which is now based in Israel, working in concert with the ships on the USS Gerald Ford, which just steamed out of Crete yesterday morning, headed to the eastern edge of the Mediterranean Sea. The USS Ford is the first in a new class of aircraft carriers. It is the flagship of the Navy. It's our crown jewel, let's say. But ironically, it is the base for an older class of fighter jets. Now, what's going on here? These jets that are on this ship will hardly have enough fuel to make it to Iran and back, let alone maneuver once they're in Iranian airspace. So what gives here? Well, I'm willing to wager that not a single aircraft launched from the Ford will ever fly over Iranian soil and will never be within range of its air defenses. These fighters are equipped with the best missiles we have, and these fighters are merely in the delivery business. Like delivery trucks, the planes from the Ford need only fly close enough to Iran, drop their payloads, and then the missiles activate, and they then fly in and strike their targets. It's the job of our stealth fighters, who will be flying all over Iran, invisibly flying around all of Iran, along with the other spy planes that are higher up, to look for targets, which are then transmitted back to the missiles dropped from the fighters from the Ford. This is called standoff weaponry in warfare, as opposed to stand-in warfare, in which bombs are dropped from planes inside the enemy airspace, like the B-2 bombers do after they take off from faraway Missouri, or as many of the jets on the USS Abraham Lincoln in the Arabian Sea will do. They'll be inside Iranian airspace. And that's the carrier group about which I'm most worried, because it is so close to the Iranian shore. However, once we have taken out their missiles and their defenses and destroyed their communications capacity, once we've sunk their entire Navy, destroyed all the SEPA's bases, and obliterated the main sites of the regime with precision bunker-busting bombs, our job is essentially over. All we need to do then is arm the people and let the regular army move in to wipe out the Faraja, the regime's sinister police protection force, its Gestapo, and the Basij, the volunteer loyalist force of civilian thugs. And then they'll surrender to us. The Artesh will surrender. So let's move on to chapter 4, the terms of surrender, the birth of a new era. We won't even need the mullahs to surface from their rat holes to do the surrendering. They'll have nobody left to command, and they'll have no power to command them anyhow. The terms of surrender will be simple, and they will be made with the new military leaders who will take charge in a ceremony, probably at the White House, knowing Trump. But here are the terms of surrender, and they will be simple and fourfold. First, no nuclear enrichment of any kind. They're an oil-rich nation. They don't need nuclear power, okay? Secondly, no ballistic missile program capable of reaching Israel or Europe. We still want them to keep the nearby hostile Sunnis at bay, however, so not complete dismantling of their missile program. Third, we could probably sell it to them. Third, abolish the Republican Guard, Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthi rebels, the Islamic Jihad, and the Quds Force, and live in peace with its neighbors, particularly the Shiite majority in Iraq. More on that in part 2. And number 4, no more death to America and death to Israel. We will require them to sign the Abraham Peace Accords, recognizing Israel as its own state, and normalize relations with them. Those are the 4 things. That's all we're going to ask for. For agreeing to these terms, America promises Three things. One, an end to all hostility. Two, an end to all economic sanctions and normalizing economic relations. And three, a 10-year protectorate of Iran from all the nations in the region. That's it. Nice and easy, Japanesey. The more we promise to do for them, the more it can be turned against us as coercion. We want them and the world to see that America is no longer in the business of minding other people's business. They are now free to do as they wish, so long as their interests do not collide with ours. We are open for business on day one. They are totally free to institute whatever government they want, do business with whomever they want, and levy taxes however they want. All we want is an end to aspirations of Western conquest or subversion. If we do this, they will quickly become the greatest Muslim country in the world, and a light to the rest of Islam, and a reproach to the corrupt Islamic oligarchs that now hold the reins of power in governments all over the region. It will be a true turning point in the region, and indeed a pivotal moment in the history of the world. It will be the birth of an entirely new era, an era of peace and prosperity, and perhaps even an era of super abundance. But for more on that, you'll have to wait for my episode on George Gilder's groundbreaking book from 2023, Life After Capitalism. We'll see you in part 2. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, pass this on social media, and hit that like button, please. Take care. God love you.